Hello everyone, welcome to our Egyptian Online Seminar Group. First, keep your microphones off. Then, if you have any questions, you can ask our speaker after his presentation. I have great pleasure of welcoming Professor Sabur Mollah. Professor Sabur Mollah holds a chair in financial management at Sheffield University Management School, the University of Sheffield. He worked as a professor of accounting and finance at Swansea University and as a professor of finance at the University of Hull before joining the University of Sheffield. His papers have appeared in the world leading and internationally excellent journals, including the Journal of Accounting and Economics, the Journal of Corporate Finance, the Journal of Banking and Finance, the Journal of Financial Stability. Now we will start our seminar with Professor Sabur Mula.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. It is a great pleasure, and thank you for having me here. It is a great pleasure to make a presentation on this seminar series. And as Mohammed already introduced me, my name is Sabur Mollah. I'm a professor of finance, financial management at Sheffield University Management School. Today, I'm going to be presenting a paper on Sharia governance versus conventional board governance, synergies and counter-synergies. This is a paper, actually, I should say, I have been working on Islamic banking governance since 2008-9. And this is one of, this paper is the output of the ongoing research in the field. I'm gonna try to present a number of my publications already on this field on Islamic banking and comparative analysis of Islamic and conventional banks. And I think then you would be able to understand why we are planning to pursue this research and what is the value of it. So before I move into the main paper, let me share the outline of the presentation here. Okay, so the outline of the presentation is about the overview. First of all, I'm going to talk about the overview of the paper or the background of the study. Then I'm going to be talking about the Islamic banking governance model, the literature review. Then I'm going to take you through the research questions and hypotheses, the data method, empirical results, major findings, and contributions. So this is how I am planning to present my research. So first of all, let us begin with bank governance literature. I think if you are familiar with bank governance, you would understand. I have been heavily involved in corporate governance for banks, as I said, since 2008. And I have indicated a number of papers on bank governance literature here, including a number of my papers as well. So as you can see, in general, bank governance literature focus on either managerial approach or shareholder approach. Managerial approach basically talks about maybe the board leadership, for example, CEO or CFO or any other executives and their role. And the other aspect of board governance is about shareholder approach. And shareholder approach talks a lot about independent director, a strong board, and a strong board usually takes the view of the shareholder or the independent directors actually help shareholders. So we divide the literature in two different major segments. One is the manager incentive or manager approach, and the other one is the shareholder approach. And as you can see that a number of literature I have outlined here on the top, all the top papers, of course, including a number of my papers here as well. And this is broadly how the board governance looks like. As you are aware of the global financial crisis in 2008, immediately after the crisis, actually, when the crisis, the banks are in crisis or the financial markets are in crisis, there are significant efforts made from the policymakers, regulators, to understand what is happening, why we anticipate such a horrendous crisis in 2008-9 or 7-8-9, I should say. Following up the crisis, Dodd-Frank Act has been implemented in the USA, and there are two different other committee reports have been presented based in Basel, that is Basel Committee 10 and 15. And in a nutshell, Dodd-Frank Act, Basel Committee Report 2010 and 2015 emphasize a lot on the board level governance. Okay, so basically, if you look at academic papers published after 2010, every single governance paper talked about Dodd-Frank Act, talked about Basel Committee 2010 and 15 Act, because committee reports. So these are the because these reports heavily emphasized on the importance of the board governance. Therefore, it comes in the forefront of the discussion, right? So this paper is not an exception. In this paper, we also talked about Dodd-Frank. We also talk about Basel Committee 2010 and 15, and we eventually focus on the board governance. And as I mentioned, there are really a number of papers have been published on the board governance issues, specifically on the board leadership, for example, CEO role, and also independent role of the independent director. And as I also mentioned, I have written really a number of papers on this field as well. You will see a number of my papers are here as well. So papers published in Journal of Accounting and Economics 2017, the paper published in Journal of Corporate Finance 2017, the paper published in Journal of Financial Stability, that is 2017, and paper published in 2015 in Journal of Banking Finance, Journal of Financial Services Research published in 2017, and recent papers, actually I still put working paper that has been accepted at the Review of Corporate Finance 2020. So all these papers actually talk about either the manager view or shareholder view, specifically focusing the board governance, since that is the main focus after the global financial crisis. So after looking at the board governance system, as this is a fundamental kind of area, to understand, I mean, or why the global crisis happened, and try to squeeze the issue so that we don't anticipate similar crisis in the future. So today I'm going to be talking about a little bit different topic. We are going to talk about Sharia-based, Sharia-compliant banks, that is Islamic banks. So you can see in the left-hand side is a pyramid here, and that is a three-layer pyramid. We say multi-layer governance system, basically. So I'm saying single tier is the normal corporate governance system in banks, in conventional banks, where usually board of directors. In some exceptions, in some countries, for example, Austria, for example, in Germany, there is a two-tier board. They have got executive board and supervisory board. On the other hand, Islamic bank, on top of the pyramid is the belief of on God, that is Allah. Yeah, that is the basic foundation philosophy of Islamic banking. Then comes for two different tiers. Tier 1 is about the Sharia board, and Sharia board either could have either supervisory or advisory role, and the supervisory role in Islamic banks actually plays some supervisory part of the governance. And the second layer or second tier of the Islam banking governance system of the board of directors, that is very much compliant with the regular board of directors in conventional banks. So these are the basic difference between the governance system between Islamic and conventional banks. So when you understand that, to understand that more precisely, we published a paper in 2017 at Journal of Financial Services Research. In this paper, the title of the paper is Bank Governance Performance Risk Taking Islamic versus Conventional Banks. It was quite simple paper because, as I said, we try to understand why the differences, how the difference we can exploit. You can see the left-hand side is Islamic banking multi-layer governance system, and the right-hand side is the conventional bank single-layer governance system. So we try to understand whether the governance system, the difference in governance system actually make any difference in the bank behavior in terms of performance and risk taking. Okay, so what we did here is we actually constructed corporate governance scores for Islamic banks and conventional banks and try to compare uh, and see whether Islamic banks are any better than conventional banks. Okay, so these are the results we published in the 2017 paper. You can see basic results are here. When I know I can show that you can see the interaction. If you know corporate governance research, usually we run interaction. So the first variable is Islamic bank dummy here, and all are significant, not significant. All are positive. None of them is significant indeed uh, with the risk taking. So indeed, Islamic banks seems to have taken more risk, but none of the variable or coefficient is significant. Then comes with corporate governance index. We can clearly see that is significant positive. That means better governance. Possibly the boards are going to take more shareholder view. That means they are going to take more risk. But when we interact Islamic bank with corporate governance index, all of the relationships actually turn into negative and significant. That indicates that when we Islamic banks interact or Islamic bank governance system in a nutshell, I should say, Islamic banking governance because of the Sharia compliance, because of the belief in one God, possibly they are not aggressive in risk taking. So that is a signal we should say, and this paper sent to the academics that well, Islamic banks in principle are not aggressive in risk taking. So that is what has been clearly shown empirically. We can see the interaction term for Islamic bank and corporate governance index is significant negative. That means Islamic banking governance system actually are not encouraging banks to take more risk. So they are actually mitigating more risk taking. So that is a good sign. And possibly because of less risk taking, bank might be less vulnerable during crisis, this kind of situation. So Islamic banks did much better in the global crisis 2008 and 9, as you know, because of the less risk-taking behavior they show. Right. So then in the same paper, JFSR paper, we have got another group of regressions are here. You can see Islamic banks dummies are all significant negative. In principle, Islamic banks have less performance, financial performance, but when they interact with corporate governance index, they are significant positive. So, Islamic banks actually extract more rents for the shareholder, even though they are eventually less risk takers compared to conventional banks. So that is the paper published in 2017. Even though the next paper I'm going to talk about the corporate governance paper published in Journal of Banking Finance, that came a little bit later, a little earlier, but that is the second paper basically. So this is the first paper I wrote, and this paper clearly indicates that there is a clear difference between Islamic bank and conventional banks governance mechanism. And we can see statistically, we prove that Islamic banks are less risk prone, but they still extract good rents for the shareholders. Then comes to the second paper. This paper is a very popular paper indeed, because this paper has got, I think, about 400 or 500 citations in Google Scholar. This is a fantastic paper published in Journal of Banking and Finance in 2015. Role of Shariah Supervisory and Advisory Board. In this paper, we extended our primary thoughts, because in the primary thoughts, we had simply a comparison between Islamic and conventional bank governance system. We try to understand the behavior, what type of difference in behavior between Islamic and conventional banks. So in this paper, we actually clearly segregated Shariah Supervisory Board and Shariah Advisory Board, because Shariah Supervisory Board some kind of mandate, and on the other hand, Advisory Board they don't have any kind of mandate, rather than it is some kind of recommendation, right? So what we have done is we clearly segregated Advisory Board from Supervisory Board, and we try to understand whether either the segregation actually gives any better result. And here we have left hand side variable is from performance, and as we can see here that because in the earlier paper we are not able to show Shariah board very precisely, because that was simple comparison between Islamic and conventional banks. So here what happened, you can see SSB, Shariah Supervisory Board. Yeah, Shariah Supervisory Board, in case of the yellow mark, all of them are called Supervisory Board. So we can see when it is Supervisory Board, that is positive significant, most of the cases, right? That indicate that when supervisory role have been played by the Supervisory Board, that is going to add value to the firm. The financial performance is going to go up because of that. So on the other hand, board size, you can see ln log board size, that is a when you have negative sign, meaning that smaller board are going to increase better performance. On the other hand, higher board independence actually going to decay or reduce firm performance. So possibly small higher bow, I mean higher independent director or large independent director may not going to help the shareholders at all. On the other hand, smaller board size or Shariah board size are going to help firm performance. So, and on the other hand, advisory board all are like non-color ones. None of them are, some of them are significant, but most of them are insignificant, indicating a clear difference between Shariah Supervisory Board and Advisory Board. So basically in this paper, the paper published as on the banking finance, we clearly segregated Shariah Supervisory Advisory Board, try to indicate there is a difference. And we concluded in this paper that Shariah Supervisory role is something a bank should expect, specifically the shareholder should expect, and they are playing a significant role in Islamic banks. Okay. Then we moved on a little bit and try to see what we can do next. So what we did here in this paper, this is a paper recently accepted to be published at the Review of Corporate Finance. And the paper is about risk-taking and bank governance, Islamic conventional banks. In this paper, we try to explore two things, what we didn't do in the earlier papers. We try to bring the, you can remember, in Islamic banking governance system, at the top of the layer is the belief in one God, right? So that means basic foundation of Islamic bank is about religiosity. So we try to bring religiosity here. And we try to see if religiosity is something playing role, and if that is driven by Shariah Supervisory Board. A strong board, on the other hand, is smaller board size and high independence, whether any risk-taking behavior is going to change. So initially, we understand from the 2017 paper that Islamic banks are going to take less risk, right? And we try to understand here why are they going to take risk? Are they going to take less risk because of their religious belief? That is because Islamic banks have the primary foundation of Islamic banking governance is about belief in one God. That is, religiosity is very important. So we try to plug religiosity and strong board together and try to understand whether these are the factors that are driving the risk-taking behavior or not. Okay. So this is the basic, the main result, I should say. You can see the red mark. Strong board, when it interacts with Shariah Supervisory Board, all of them are, the positive sign of log Z score and the TANEC, that is, both are negative sign basically. On the other hand, NPL is a positive sign. So indicating that, so higher the Z score, meaning less the risk, higher the TANEC is less the risk. On the other hand, higher the NPL is the higher the risk. So basically you can see all of them are actually mitigating risk taking. Whenever they are strong board and Shariah Supervisory Board are interacting together, they are going to reduce the risk taking. And on the other hand, the second variable is religiosity, because we try to play around and plug religiosity and strong board together. Religiosity perform in the same way. So because of religiosity principle, Islamic banks are going to take less risk, and at the same time, Shariah Supervisory Board and strong board, when they integrate together, they are going to be actually less. They show more, more and more less taking behavior, right? So if I summarize all of my papers, like the 3 papers I talked about, what we see here is that the first paper, 2017 paper, this is the first paper, even though we published a little bit later. That is the first paper. We simply try to compare between Islamic conventional bank and we establish a difference. Second, we segregated supervisory advisory board and we found the supervisory board something is playing a significant role. Then coming with the third paper, the last one I said, because of religiosity principle and because of a strong board, Islamic banks are going to be more or less risk taker, right? Because of the commitment of the religiosity, because of the belief in one God, you cannot be excessive risk taker, right? So then what is next? So, I mean, the next is our research question in this paper, basically. So in this paper, we try to establish what could be next after all understanding all the papers. So basically, what you can see from the previous research, what we have done, I have to focus on my papers because these are the key papers in corporate governance Islamic banks. Okay. So if you do research on Islamic bank governance, I think you will not miss my paper. So you know these are the key papers in the field. Okay. So what we understand from this paper that both Islamic bank governance, Islamic banking governance system, specifically this strong board, as you say, or the Sharia supervisory board, these are the two elements are going to play a role, right? But we didn't clarify in either of these papers, either this 17, 15 or 2020 paper, we never clearly established whether the two components, Sharia supervisory board and the board of directors, whether they are in some way integrated. If they are integrated, whether they are going to complement each other or they are going to substitute each other. So I think you know this complementary thing. Complementary is both are integrated, one is helping the other. On the other hand, substituting mean is one is actually, uh, I mean, performing better than the other. So basically, substitution is about competition. On the other hand, complementary is helping each other. So we try to understand in this paper whether the relationship between Sharia supervisory board and main board of directors, whether the relationship is, the integration is complementary or substituting. So that is we try to establish first of all through an endogenous relationship. So our first hypothesis is about the Sharia supervisory board and board of director, whether they're endogenous. If they're endogenous, the endogeneity is uh, going to be complementary or substituting. This is what we try to understand from here. And if the relationship is complementary or substituting, and then we can have the follow-up questions. That mean we can do the follow-up tests. What we can do, what we have planned to do here is, because there are a number of papers, not in governance field, in different other fields have been done. I think if you research Islamic banking, I think you are familiar with Abedifar et al. Paper, you are familiar with Beck 2012 paper or Al-Khatani paper. So there are only a handful of papers published in the top journals, and they didn't do governance, they did something else, right? So what we understand, we try to understand in the first research question is to establish whether the relationship is complementary or substituting. And based on the relationship, we then try to see the outcome. And the outcome we are going to take in the camel form, that is the capital adequacy, for example. As you can see here, Al-Khatani 2016, they said Islamic banks are more capitalized than conventional banks. On the other hand, Beck et al. Find that smaller IBs are marginally more capitalized. So the findings are not consistent because they rely on different samples. Abedifar find there is no difference between Islamic bank and conventional banks in terms of capital adequacy ratio. So if you see these key papers, we are not clear whether there is a significant difference between Islamic bank and conventional banks. But we try to understand the relationship between the boards, that is the supervisory board, advisory board, and based on the relationship, whether Islamic banks are going to mitigate, because we try to exploit the relationship between the two boards. And based on the relationship between the two boards, we like to understand whether that relationship is going to mitigate or enhance capital adequacy or not. So our framework is completely different from these papers because they straightaway test between conventional Islamic banks and they try to see whether Islamic banks are better than conventional banks in terms of capital adequacy. We said no. We like to see the relationship between these two boards and with the relationship, whether the relationship is going to actually help mitigate or enhance capital adequacy. This is the second hypothesis, right? Third one, again, we are going to exploit the relationship between the two boards, complementary or substituting, and we try to understand asset quality, the impact on the asset quality. So again, we have got the findings, existing findings. You can see Abedifer et al. Find Islamic banks have a low credit risk than conventional banks, and on the other hand, Beck didn't find any difference between Islamic conventional banks. Okay, and then there are other group of papers. They indicate that the profit and loss sharing products, that is Islamic bank products, require information disclosure more, thus enhance credit risk. And because the credit risk actually is channeled through information asymmetry and moral hazard. So Islamic banks eventually incur more credit risk. On the other hand, Abedifar is saying Islamic banks have lower credit risk. So again, the findings here are very inconclusive. They are divided, right? Beck didn't find any relationship. Abedifar found Islamic banks have low credit risk. On the other hand, this group of papers I have identified here, they are saying Islamic banks are more risky. Okay, because of the disclosure and information asymmetry. So the results are again inconclusive. None of the paper did corporate governance. So what we have done here, we have to try to explore the relationship, as I said, between two boards and try to see whether anything happens, any improvement in terms of mitigating or enhancing asset quality. So that is hypothesis number 3. So then we move on to the next as well, that is called management quality. Abedifar et al. 2013 find IBs do not charge higher rates for the Sharia compliant products. And on the other hand, Beck do not find any difference between two types of banks. Again, they are very inconclusive here. Al-Khatani find IBs rely less on intermediate activities that generate fees and commissions. So again, there are some kind of indication that Islamic bank products possibly could be more efficient. So what we have done here again, we try to see the relationship between Sharia Supervisory and Advisory Board and whether that is going to help or enhance operational cost and enhance operational efficiency. This is what we have been trying to see. That is our hypothesis number 4. So now move on. If we move on, then we can see the last, not last one, the fifth hypothesis, that is the earnings quality. Well, I mean, all of my papers actually, not all of my papers, we have got 2017 and 15 papers tested profitability indeed, and we found, I mean, there are impact of governance in the profits, of course. And Al-Khatani in 2016 shows IBs are more profitable than conventional banks. Beck find that IBs are higher stock returns. So Islamic banks in principle are more profitable compared to conventional banks. That is established. But we like to see whether that channels through the complementary or substituting relationship between the boards. That is our hypothesis number 5. And from the camel, the last one is about liquidity. There are a number of papers on liquidity indeed. That is, one comes from Ellenberger, that is published in 2019. They find Islamic bank create more liquidity. That is established fact, I think. And there is Hassan et al. Paper. They also established Islamic banks have more liquidity. So liquidity, and then Beck even says the same thing. So I think academics are more united here. Basically, they are saying Islamic banks have more liquidity, right? So we like to see whether the relationship we like to establish between Sharia Supervisory Board and Islamic Bank Board, that is going to enhance or mitigate asset quality, because liquidity is a big problem in Islamic banks, right? Because of restrictions in their investment. So we try to understand whether that, I mean, whether any improvement could be made on the liquidity aspect of Islamic banks due to the relationship between the two boards. Okay, so these are the 6 hypotheses. Out of the 6 hypotheses, the first hypothesis is about establishing the relationship between the two boards to try to understand whether the relationship is complementary or substituting. Other 5 are about the camel, that is the output we like to see in different aspects. Okay, so the theme of the paper, as you understand already, that we are we are trying to establish the dual board Islamic banks, and we try to see whether the relationship between the two boards, is there any endogenous relationship between the boards? If it does, whether relationship has got complementary or substituting relationship, and whether that is going to channel to the camel, that is capital adequacy ratio, asset quality, management quality, earnings, and liquidity. So we actually looked at financial soundness in a broader perspective in the paper. Then comes our data and sample. We have taken all the Islamic banks. In this paper, we didn't compare because it is difficult to compare, because it is apple it is apple and pear, or apple and orange. They're not that same thing, because Islamic bank is fully compliant to Sharia. They have certain restrictions in their products and services. On the other hand, conventional banks have no restrictions. So basically, it is difficult to compare. We did compare in 3 other papers, but this paper we said we're going to only do Islamic banks. So we have taken the data for Islamic banks based in 2005. I've got 170 banks we found. Follow different filtering mechanisms. Like, for example, the country should have 4 banks at least in the system, at least 2 years of data. And finally, we end up with 138 Islamic banks altogether from 24 countries. So these are the sample countries you can see. We have got 24 countries and 138 Islamic banks, having 4 banks in the country specifically, at least 2 years of data in the for a bank. Okay, so this is the data we found. Now, in terms of model, we set up 2 sets of models. The first set of model is about establishing the fact of endogeneity, whether the relationship is endogenous or not. So we follow Link et al. 2008 Journal of Financial Economics paper. We run 3 SLS seemingly unrelated equation to determine endogenous relationship between Shariah Supervisory Board and Board of Directors. We have got board in the left-hand side in the first equation. There are series of equations, you understand. And the second equation, left-hand side variable, is Shariah Supervisory Board. So we try to understand whether relationship is endogenous between these 2 boards. And based on the relationship, we then follow up and see whether that relationship is going to channel to the camel ratios. Okay, so you have got camel ratios. You will see here a capital adequacy ratio, that is tier 1 capital and total capital. Then comes with asset quality, that is loan loss provision, loan loss reserve. We have got management quality. We've got cost income ratio, net interest. We have got earnings, return on asset, average asset, return on shareholders equity. Then comes with liquidity, 2 proxies, 2 each. There are 10 different proxies you will find altogether. Okay, so now board variable. We have taken a number of board variables. We have got 6 different variables, and by using these variables, we construct in this index for board. Then again, we have got 6 different variables for the Sharia board, and we construct a Sharia index. We have got an index as for the board leadership, that is a CEO power as well. So these are the summary of the variables. You can see in the Sharia Supervisory Board, we have got Sharia Supervisory Board size, Sharia Supervisory Board. We have got 2 of them, either advisory supervisory. We have taken only supervisory because that is more powerful. Whether they publish Sharia Supervisory report, Sharia Supervisory board has any foreigner. Then we have taken the qualifications like FIC, law, and economic. This is the composite qualifications we need. We have taken whether any star member in there, that is Sharia Supervisory top 20 have taken. There is another one is called top 12, top 20 member, that is star member. In the board, we have got 6 variables: board size, board independence, number of board meetings, number of board committees, number of female directors, percent in attendance. And we've got 5 different variables are in the CEO variables, what CEO duality, internal education, banking experience, and tenure. So these are the variables. So basically, we come up with index because there are too many variables, right? So what we have done, we construct an index is called board index. Second group is called Sharia index, and third one is called CEO power index. So CEO power index still is a control, of course. And so in the empirical setting, we move into the first set of regression, that is the endogenous relationship between board of directors and Sharia Supervisory Board. So we run that 3 SLS seemingly unrelated regression here. And you can see the first model has got board and the left hand side. And then of course we have got the right hand side variable is Shariah supervisory board and other variables. And we can see the Shariah supervisory board index is very, very highly significant, both statistically and economically significant. And there are other results are there, but I'm not going to explain other things because focus area is about Shariah and board. So the next second variable of model one is about left hand side variable should be SSB. And we can see again board index is very highly significant, and both statistic and economic significance is here. So that again we have got three model in the second model two is the three different equations. We have got one power index there, but power index is not significant. It doesn't matter. We are not going to establish anything, any relationship with power. So basically two boards. So we establish here the two boards are very, very highly correlated, interrelated to each other. We did a lot of explanation what the relationship indicates and means because of a creation of Shariah supervisory board is to help and assist. It's not only do the fragmentation and what is called creating confusion and chaos. So because of that, we argue that this relationship is actually complementary to each other because they are going to help strengthen the relationship for the board governance system. And we, taking the notion, we move into the camel setting and try to see what is happening in the relationship. So basically, if we move on, we can see the capital adequacy ratio and all of them you can see here: asset quality, management quality, earnings, profitability, liquidity. Okay. So what is happening? You can see that board index we have got positive to positively related to asset or capital adequacy ratio. On the other hand, Shariah supervisory is negative. There are issues about significance level here, of course, but when they interact each other, they are going that coefficients are going to be negative and highly significant. Yeah, at least the second one. That indicates that because of the complementary relationship between these two boards, uh, capital adequacy is going to diminish. So basically, maybe because of cooperation and collaboration between the two boards, they find better avenues or more avenues for investment that can help decay or mitigate capital adequacy ratio. Second, we can see that asset quality, we have got both of them like board and Shariah supervisory board are going to increase the asset quality. On the other hand, when we can interact them, it is significant negative, uh, statistical significant as well and economic significance as well. So that indicates that because of integration between these two boards, there might have less quality in the asset. Then comes the third one about management quality. You can see again individually, management quality decays in both the cases, like board index or Shariah index. But when they integrate each other, that is both of them jointly is going to increase or enhance management quality significantly. Then comes with profitability. Independently, both the boards are going to increase profitability, but because of one effort, we can see negative significance. So basically, what is happening here, they might engage in huge investment. They might have several negative NPV projects they might take because of integration, and that may cause negative profitability. The last one is about liquidity. That is, as I said, is a key problem in Islamic banks. As you can see, if you study only board director, you can see board directors are going to increase liquidity. So liquidity, huge liquidity is a common problem in Islamic banks. And that is there because we didn't study that before, but previous studies already clearly show that. And because of maybe segmentation of the boards, when they integrate, they significantly reduce and mitigate liquidity problem. So they do two things. They mitigate the liquidity problem. On the other hand, they expand their investment. So in some cases, we can argue that the investment might be a little bit going beyond their kind of limit that needs some kind of control so that they can actually go for more prudential kind of investment that can benefit the shareholders better. So basically, overall, what we can see is that the current state, the good news for the integration is that because of integration, Islamic banks is going to get rid of the liquidity problem. On the other hand, they are going to invest more, and eventually they are end up with, maybe, even though the management quality is improving because of the expansion, but because of expansion, huge investment, and maybe by resolving the liquidity issues, they are going to create some problem for the shareholder. That means the shareholders are going to have less profit. So that is where the boards need to actually give more attention and try to fix the issue and try to find out more optimum investment and more potential investment, so that they can still optimize profitability, accounting profits for the shareholders. Because currently they might look more about the managerial views of the board, integrated board. When the boards are integrated together, maybe Sharia supervisory board, they compromise their kind of ethical values, maybe, and they may listen more uh, to the board. So they might engage in more kind of risk-taking investment, and that eventually not help shareholder to extract higher return. So that is one problem here. We try to expand the analysis in different ways by following previous papers. We try to see how it helps with hybrid legal system and also Western legal system. Uh, there are some differences, but the differences are not noticeable in either of the cases. So I didn't mark any of them basically. There are some small difference we can see, but the results mostly are insignificant. So I didn't highlight a lot. Then we try to run the model between young and old banks. As we can understand, young and mid-age banks, because there are only few um, very old age banks, and you can see the results mostly pronounced in the mid-age banks, more matured banks. Young banks, the results are all insignificant. On the other hand, if you go to matured banks, most of the results hold. So that indicates that maturity matters in Islamic banks, and they can learn through their experience. Okay, we try to see the size difference, small size, small and medium size, and large banks. And as we can see, some result, exist in case of small and medium size, because there are not many large banks in Islamic system. So most of the result may be hold in case of small and medium banks. Then we try to understand the crisis effect and non-crisis effect. Well, the results mostly hold in during the non-crisis period. That is a normal period. Even though Islamic banks are not hugely hard or hit by the global crisis, uh, there are only a few results exist during the crisis period, but most of the results exist for the non-crisis period. Okay. So these are the main results, and let me summarize what we found. Of course, I think I've already explained that. First of all, we managed to establish that there is a endogenous relationship between Sharia supervisory and board of directors, and this is the first paper in governance, Islamic governance study that established the relationship, and we conclude that the relationship is complementary. So they are helping and cooperating each other. That is a very good news. And because of the cooperation, we as I said, we actually identify that there is some kind of bad news for Islamic Bank because of the cooperation, the capital adequacy is going to decay. So that is something Islamic Bank need to fix. They have to find out a more prudential kind of investment whereby they can actually maintain a required capital. At the same time, they can continue investing. Second, as I also uh, indicate earlier, that integration actually significantly diminishes asset quality. That is again a bad news. Even though there are other papers, they have already found a similar result. For example, Beck et al. 2013, that is one of the famous papers, of course, published in the Journal of Banking Finance. They found similar result. But what is the solution? Solution is Islamic banks, maybe the board integration is going to is not going to help here. So they might they need to sit back and think how can they improve their kind of asset quality. Then management quality has improved significantly. That is a very good news, and that is very much in line with Beck and Abedifer paper. That is fantastic, very consistent results. Um, we also found that profitability diminishes. That is significant with similar with previous studies. So that Islamic Bank need to sit back and think how to maximize the shareholder interest rather than serving the manager's views. The final finding is very promising, as I mentioned clearly that our result indicate um, was in some way resolve the issues of excess liquidity problem in Islamic banks. Islamic banks, the integration between board and Shariah Supervisory Board is going to somehow mitigate the liquidity issues. That is something I think this paper explored. In terms of contribution, what this paper contributes? Of course, the first primary contribution is, as I indicated, this is the first paper to establish a relationship between the two boards. And we argue that the relationship is complementary. So that is something we are establishing in this paper. And this camel effect, like capital adequacy ratio, asset quality, management quality, earnings, and liquidity. These either effect, this is like, I mean, financial soundness, as we are saying, this is a wider effect on Islamic banks. And that is channeling through the integration and cooperation between regular board of directors and Shariah Supervisory Board. That is the complementary relationship. This is the main kind of contribution in this paper. This paper also, well, I mean, because of the complementary relationship, this paper complement many existing studies. Even all of my papers, I am saying somehow, and the previous paper like Abedifer, Beck et al., we found some consistent results with this. So that the findings of this paper complements earlier studies as well. Then other new contributions, for example, there is a paper published in Journal of Corporate Finance, Saiful and Samsuddin. They have been talking about there is a gap between the board of directors, their understanding, the knowledge gap they clearly said, but they didn't establish why. So we try to identify the gap, and actually there is not a lot of difference between the boards, and we understood that is clearly a relationship, and there is a cooperation and coordination between these boards. So this cooperation and collaboration, that is the complementary relationship, is actually helping banks in two ways. First of all, it is helping efficiency, managerial efficiencies has been improved because of that. And second is that liquidity problem is resolved in some ways. So, well, I mean, this is the findings are still early. We are still presenting the paper in different places, of course, but I think so far we understood this paper is going to make good contributions in the ongoing discussions and debates on Islamic banking governance literature. And in this paper, we didn't compare between Islamic and conventional because it is not a level playing field. So basically, it is better we try to only study Islamic banks and try to understand how it works within the Islamic banking system. Okay, so that's it so far in terms of my presentation, and I really appreciate your comments and questions, and so that we can improve the paper, and we can actually maybe build some of the arguments in a better way than we have done in this paper. And yeah, so with that, I should conclude my presentation here, and thanks very much for your time and listening to my presentation. And I will really appreciate your questions and comments on the presentation. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, dear Professor Sabur, for your contribution and your effort. It's really excellent presentation. Now, if anyone have any questions, you can open your mic and ask your question. Khan, you can open your mic and ask question. Khan, yes.
Yeah. Hi, Professor.
Hi.
Hi, this is Khakan from Sheffield University, Malaysia.
Okay. Yeah.
I have a couple of questions.
Yes.
My first question, which I write it down in the comments also,
I
is
didn't. Just give me a second. Let me see your. So you said you have written in the comment, yeah?
yeah, I write it
Oh,
down
okay.
the
Yeah.
comments
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
thought
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
would be like this channel, but it's better this way also.
Yeah.
So it's about the heterogeneity of because you have 24 countries and your sample is 167. Am I right?
As 167 was the primary sample, but we have to squeeze it later on. So basically,
130.
we end up with 138.
Yeah. So don't you think there will be an issue of this? And if there is, then how do you address that?
Heterogeneity is a very common problem, I think, in Islamic banking governance Islamic banking literature, because, well, I mean, in terms of size and distribution, you understand, because we are studying 24 countries, we actually try to implement some kind of sampling system that, for example, at least 4 banks in a country, at least minimum representation, we have looked into it. We try to see at least 2 years of data because we have to use some lag variables. So we don't miss out any of them. But I understand there are heterogeneity because some banks are very young, maybe if only 2 years of data, that meaning these the 2-year bank having 2-year data, meaning very, very young bank. On the other hand, I know there are banks exist from 2005. There are many banks came in from 2008, I mean, from 80s, I know. But
Yeah.
especially from this sample, from 2005, some banks data are available. So there is a clearly difference is there. Young bank, old bank, small size, big size. There are issues there, but I mean, heterogeneity is something we cannot 100% address in this kind of sample because we have only few banks. Okay, if you ask me about other studies I am doing on the global banks, I can easily address that because there are many banks available. But in Islamic banks, only a few banks. So maybe you might be right, but we tried our best to address the heterogeneity issues.
Okay. My second question, I
Yeah.
would like that if you share your slide where you have this construction of the index.
Yeah.
In the construction of the index, I like to see. Can you share your slide, please? Because it was very fast for me to understand.
Okay.
Maybe.
Let me bring it back. Yes. So you like to see the index?
There
Yeah.
was a slide before the descriptive statistics. It
Yeah.
was the
Yeah. Yeah.
construction of the
I know what
index.
you mean. You would like to see this one, yeah?
Uh, yeah.
Board indices, yes.
Yeah. Can you make it maximize, please?
I think that is okay. Let me see. Yeah. Can you see now?
Yeah. Yeah, I can see now. So my question is about the how you flag the value. Like if I talk about the board size,
Yeah.
it's written that we consider board size dummy one if the board size is smaller than the median board size of the sample.
Yeah.
So your sample includes the firm, sorry,
All
the bank,
banks. Yeah. Banks.
all
Yeah.
banks, and might be a significant difference in the size of the bank.
There are not a significant difference because I think the maximum board size should be around, I can show you here, 14, yeah. So there's only one bank, I think, no, it's board size here. So it is 3 and 22. Yes, there might have difference. Yeah. So for example, the 22, I think this is Islamic Bank Bangladesh Limited. So far I can understand. They have a very big board. But on the other hand, one of the banks I think has got 3. Yeah.
So
So the
okay,
median, I don't have median value here, but yeah. So what is your question? Tell me.
my question is that some of the because you have 24 countries data and OECD has a limitation of the board size. Like they might apply a minimum limit of like 3 for one country and maybe 5 for another.
Yeah.
So while constructing the index, I think this is another thing we need to consider. What whether the country is OECD listed or not, whether they are the member of OECD or not, and whether they apply any minimum limit for that or not while constructing the index and flagging them into a board indices.
Yeah, I know this is a common issue because, well, I mean, I know I get your point, but the thing is, I mean, if you like to accommodate a number of variables, that is the only way to construct a variable. I can do in different ways, of course, because here I have taken 0 and 1. I could take -1 and +1. That can resolve the issue, but I don't think that is going to change the result because I know where you are saying the sum with the 22 bank having 22, for example, the median board size may be 8 or 9. Yes. On the other hand, I'm taking 1, and so I mean there is some kind of discrimination here. I understand, but I think when you are handling with a large number of variables, the 6 variable I have to accommodate in 1 variable because I am very keen to see the effect of that variable rather than having the effect of board size specifically or board independence specifically. So that's why I put them together, all of them. My friend Khaled is here. I know Khaled will maybe see him sometimes later. And so we have to somehow sacrifice, you know, I understand because I have been working on this corporate governance for about 12 years now. And I know these are some issues and I don't think this is a very big issue. I understand. You can argue, of course, why not? Why I'm not going to take the real variable? I could, of course, take the real variable, but then maybe my kind of main focus will somehow shift. So my main focus is to understand the relationship between these two. So how can we see it? The only way to look into it that is to construct an index that can resolve the issue, bring them together. Actually, that is why I've done it. Yes.
Okay. One last as a suggestion. There is a study in 2016 by Professor Chen. It was published in Corporate Governance International Review, and they also construct a board independence index, likewise yours. And they discuss about how they actually construct the different variables, including the board size. And they take care of the limit of OECD as well as the way they flag the board index was different because different studies say the bigger board size give you profit and the different studies say the bigger board size will give you loss.
So, because there are the different studies are giving different results. Because for example, here, this study, I showed you that in the presentation, this paper, here in this paper, we have got index. We have got corporate governance index instead of board index. So here we have got, I think 14 or 15 variable. I forgot the number. And we convert all of them together in one value, you know. So
make it directional.
So
just for reference, I am putting that study in the comments. So I hope it will be helpful for them.
Oh, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Definitely. Yeah. I really appreciate your point and I'm gonna look into your comment. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
I would like to welcoming dear Professor Khalid Husseini. You are very welcome, dear Prof.
Thank you, Muhammad, and thank you, Sabur, for
Khalid, assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Very interesting presentation. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I like the story about complementary or substitutes, but my question is, how can you know if the relationship between the board index and SSB index is substitute or complement? Considering that when you show your table, I found negative and positive relationship for the interactive variable.
Yeah. So what is happening, Khaled? How we conclude here is that when you see most of the cases in the camel variables, you can see most of the cases here, both board and supervisory board are more or less acting in the similar direction. So you can see if you compare, for example, board size in some exception there, but most of the cases when it is positive, or I can't because it's a figure. So I mean, it's a graph, but you can see like board size, board index coefficients. If it is positive, you can see Shariah supervisory board positive. So that indicates they are cooperative. On the other hand, if it is substituting, one would be positive, one would be negative. So one is heading toward the south, another one will head towards the north. Okay. But most of the cases, what happens here is board is saying plus, Shariah board is saying plus. This is widespread in the results. So that gives us some kind of feeling, because both of the boards are actually directing toward the similar direction. So then otherwise it would have complete different direction.
But the interacted variable,
Yeah,
negative in all cases, which might suggest substitute rather than complement relationship.
well, yes, you can say that, but the thing is, because what is happening when they interact, the relationship is going to be completely opposite, because most of the cases, the main results, you can see this indices, most of them are, this exception is only management quality. So that is negative and it has come positive, but rest of them all positive, it comes to negative. So basically, when you interact, of course, the results are going to be completely opposite, because the two positives are going to be negative, two negatives are going to be positive. So that exactly happened. That is a mathematical kind of thing happened here. So it may need more interpretation. Yes.
I think for complementary
Yeah.
effect, the interacted coefficient should
Yeah.
be higher than the sum of the coefficient for the first variable and the coefficient of the second variable.
Okay. So that is a good point. We have to think about it. Yes.
So with the negative coefficient for the interacted one, I think this suggests substitute rather than complement.
Okay. So you are saying you have to add the two them together?
If you add them together, the coefficient should be positive and higher than both of them.
Okay. Do you have any reference?
I have, yes, Hosseini and Walker, 2009.
Please send me that paper to my
I will
email. Yeah.
send, yes. I have 3 papers about the complements
Okay.
and substitutes. So I would
Please,
send.
that will benefit, because we are still still struggling with the historian thing. So will be really it would be really helpful if we can consult those papers.
I will share it with you. Okay.
Send that to my email. Okay, directly.
I will do. I will do. Thank
Thanks
you.
a lot, Khaled. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Prof. Khalid. Are there another question? If anyone have any questions, you can open your mic and ask your question.
Hello.
May I ask a question?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you for your valuable presentation, sir. I want to ask the question for the specifically for the operation level. At the operation level exploitation, especially operational level exploitations within the parameter of conventional bank and Islamic bank, while how much more tendency you can observe in both atmospheres, especially from both sides, client side and operational managerial side. Comparative study of the tendency of the exploitational tendency within the parameters of the given rules and regulations of the operational level.
Okay, so you are asking me more philosophical question, I think. What we have done, as I mentioned in my previous studies, specifically, we try to compare between Islamic and conventional bank, for example, here. And if you ask me about this paper, I can maybe answer a little bit your question. If you go here, we also compare between Islamic conventional, but we in particular focus on Shariah supervisory and advisory roles. Then comes in this paper, that was a comparison again. I would try to exploit the religiosity and Shariah supervisory board and see whether when they kind of go alongside the strong board, whether that is going to help more or less risk taking, whatever. But in this paper, intentionally, we dropped the conventional banks. There is no conventional bank here. We have only Islamic banks. So we don't know whether there is any operational difference between conventional Islamic banks here in this paper. But so far I understand there is a difference, because in Islamic banks, Shariah supervisory board, that comes from the religious belief. Religiosity is a key fundamental in Islamic banks. On the other hand, even though there are many conventional banks are practicing maybe sustainability, green banking, whatever, but they may not actually practice in their products and services up to the level of Islamic banks. So there is a clear difference, operational differences here. Secondly, in terms of leadership, Well, I mean, we didn't find a lot of difference in terms of difference. I mean, distinguishing between Islamic and conventional. So specifically, I may not be able to fully what is called articulate the question you are posing here, basically. But there are difference, and that is clear. Maybe there are lots of shortcomings from Islamic banking's operational side of it. But what I understand, the theoretically Islamic banks actually are built on a strong foundation. So maybe operationally they don't actualize it, but they have a stronger foundation than conventional banks. I'm sorry that I couldn't fully answer your question, but because the situation doesn't allow me, because I am going only working on Islamic banks here. Does it make sense to you?
الجميل, open your mic. الجميل, your mic is mute. Yes. Is there another question?
Assalamu alaikum.
Yeah, Anan.
Salam, Dr. Sabur. How are you?
I'm fine. I think I met you in the other seminar as well, yes?
Yes, of course. I don't miss your lectures.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Nice to meet you again.
Thank you, Dr. Muhammad, and welcome, Dr. Khalid. I just have a question just for me to understand, because you mentioned in one of your papers the variable strong board. What do you mean by that? And I think also you mentioned that smaller boards work more effectively in your context, so they have a minus relationship. So how do you elaborate on that? And do you depend on any theory like agency theory? Because I have a similar relationship with sustainability. So can I hear your view on that? Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. We try to exploit agency theory indeed, and specifically we try to focus on shareholder incentive view. Specifically, I think this paper is already available in the internet. So you will find this paper in ssrn.com. You will find this paper in ResearchGate and everywhere. This paper, yeah. This taking an Islamic bank governance, Islamic versus conventional banks. You will find this paper online. So in this paper, what we have been trying to exploit is basically, as I said, we try to focus on the religiosity aspect of Islamic banks. Because of religiosity, maybe the strong board, meaning we define strong board as a smaller board size and higher independence. Actually, we have copied the definition from Pathan 2009 Journal of Banking Finance. And we try to see when the board is small and higher independence in the religiosity concept, in the context of religiosity, whether they are going to take more risk or less risk. This is what we have been trying to establish. And you can see here basically when the board is strong, they are going to take less risk because we have got different proxies of different kind of directions. So basically log Z, that positive meaning that is actually less risk. TANEQ, that is positive sign mean less risk, and NPL, non-performing minus mean minus. Okay, so all of them, even though different sign you can see here, but all of them are going to reduce the risk when they have a strong board, which means a smaller board size and higher independence. Okay, and in the religiosity the same way. So religiosity, because that is, as I try to establish the fact of this multi-layer governance system here, that is where the religiosity comes from, the religious belief, okay? That is on God, okay? Where it comes from. Then we have got this board concept. We have precisely implemented the strong board concept here and try to show whether when the strong board having religiosity in it, whether they are going to take less risk. And we found out they are going to take less risk compared to conventional bank, because this in this paper, we have got exactly 86 Islamic, 86 conventional banks. So we managed to compare, try to actually compare apple to apple, even though it's not exactly apple to apple, but we try to compare and saw that, well, because of religiosity principle, Islamic banks are going to, strong boards in Islamic banks are going to mitigate risk. Does it have, is it okay, Anand?
Yes, it's okay, but I lost my connection in your first 30 seconds. You mentioned about a paper about the size board or something?
Yeah, this is the paper. Yes, this paper.
Okay.
This paper you will find in online. Yeah, this paper in online. This paper is going to appear in the Review of Corporate Finance 2021 actually. So you can download this paper from online. Okay.
Okay, so you consider on the other paper being a strong board, it means a smaller board, and that is not within the bulk of the literature where a larger board are related to better performance.
Well, I mean, because of larger board, they might have a lot of chaos. They might struggle to come to good decisions very quickly. So smaller board maybe perform better because smaller boards are efficient. In that perspective, there are a couple of papers they establish that a smaller board and high independence, that is the strong board, and we have taken the definition from there actually, rather than our own definition.
Thank you so much and hope to see you soon.
You're welcome. Okay, take care, Anand.
Are there another question? Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Hello.
Hamid bhai.
Assalamu alaikum. Sorry, actually I could not follow. Actually, I was busy with something else. Then I realized that you have a presentation today. Probably almost you finished that one. Is it that paper that presented in Saudi Arabia? That one, is it the one?
Yeah, that's the Saudi. No, that's not Saudi Arabia. No. Saudi Arabia, not that one.
Oh, okay. I forgot it. That's why I was working and I see that. Okay, there's something. Probably I missed so many things.
This is the Saudi paper. This one is the Saudi paper. Do you see my screen?
Yeah, I see a little bit. Yes, I see that. Okay,
this is the Saudi paper.
Okay, yeah, it is not much related to the paper here since you raised a question. You remember that once upon a time we had some discussions about the dual board issue about this kind of thing. Do you remember that? So that's actually one of the things strike my mind, something. It is not exactly to the paper, since it's based on your expertise knowledge, you can share something for the audience. If we look at from the agency theory perspective, Anand told about that. You see, in the corporate governance framework, the board is responsible and they must look after the shareholders' interests. If you look at from that perspective, now the Shariah board coming on the top. In the Shariah board coming on the top, is there any questions? Can they take any independent decisions? This is
well, I mean, that is again very problematic because I myself wrote in the Journal of Banking Finance paper very, very clearly that Shariah board in some cases possible, because in this paper, where is it? In this paper, if you follow this paper, in this paper we did a small survey on the Shariah board members. Not many. We surveyed, asked questions to a number of Shariah board members, and most of them they said they are fully reliant on the company secretariat. They don't have their independent office, and they mostly they actually send the recommendation. Maybe the CEO or the board most often don't listen to them. Okay, that is a common phenomenon. In that case, we clearly wrote in this paper in black and white. We wrote Shariah board is possibly rubber stamping. Okay, rubber stamping the thingy. Because they don't have that strong power. But whether they do rubber stamp or they don't do rubber stamp, whatever is the situation, because we did a small survey only. But the results you can see when we distinguish between supervisory and advisory, we can see a clear significant difference between advisory and supervisory. So the question is whether they rubber stamp or they really perform, because they may not stand up on their feet, possibly, because they're not independent. Yeah. So that is.
No, well, actually, I'm raising one of the questions. I mean, in Malaysia here, I know there are the few cases. There is a lot of actually infighting between the CEO and also board chairman and also the Shariah board. I mean, the big fight between this group.
I know. Yeah. So that is the issue is still there. I think we cannot resolve anything, but at least we can as academics we can write these things, and if they listen to us, if they read our papers, possibly they can take a different pathway. But we don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Good.
Any other question?
Yes, dear Professor Mahmoud Nagi from Mansoura University.
Oh, brilliant. Please go ahead.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Prof. Super.
Yeah, thank you.
Sabur,
Yeah, Abdul Sabur.
Abdul Sabur. Oh,
Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Around this paper and about the governor's mechanisms, the question is, how can we measure the value added of audit committee in Islamic bank governors?
Okay. Value added for audit committee in Islamic
Yeah.
Bank. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have asked me a very hard question. Possibly Khaled has to answer this question.
I said that around this title.
Yeah. We are saying, okay, so in that around the title, we are saying, because we try to see the synergy and counter synergy, whether when the boards are integrated, whether because of complementary or substituting, because Khaled has now saying something, so we have to really look into that issue more carefully again. So because of the relationship, it can create synergy or it cannot, it can be counter synergy. This is what we have been trying to see. So basically, if there is a collaboration and cooperation between the two boards, that might create synergy for the banks. That might be better for the soundness, financial soundness for the banks. If there is no cooperation between the boards, possibly that can create counter synergy. So that's why we put that in the title. Does it make sense, Professor Same?
Okay.
Thank you, dear Professor Mahmoud Nari. Are there another question? Habib, can I ask?
Yes. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. Habib, you okay?
How are you, sir?
Alhamdulillah, I'm good.
I am very grateful to the host, especially Dr. Muhammad Al Sheikh, for organizing such seminar very frequently. But I am unfortunate that I could not attend regularly. I attended a few. Anyway, sir, my question is,
yeah,
based on this research, can we make a generalized statement that conventional banks need to have a supervisory board for better corporate governance? And if the answer is yes, will this not contradict with the finding that smaller board performs better?
Yeah, so I think what you're saying, whether conventional banks should have a supervisory board, that would be a big claim, I think, because we are so far in our history, because we have got a very, very tiny sample for Islamic banks. So we have got a comparative conventional bank sample is relatively smaller. So in that case, we may not claim at this point that supervisory board something conventional banks should try. So that is one point. Second point is, as you're saying, that board size, smaller board size, as we are saying, that is a strength or a strong board. That idea may not still decay. Well, I mean, there are arguments for and against, because smaller board, as I said, it is easier because in smaller boards, you can easily take decisions. You can easily, well, I mean, it is quite easy and fast because there are less complication in smaller boards. On the other hand, when the boards are big, usually there are a lot of chaos and confusion. Okay. On the other hand, bigger boards might have better expertise in the board. So there are arguments in both sides, I'm sure. But I think in my view, so far, if I rely on my findings on the previous paper, as I said, review of corporate finance paper, of course, I should say that we believe in a smaller board that is going to add value in Islamic bank. So again, Shariah supervisory board, whether that is something should be recommended to Islamic banks, I think we have to still wait. That is kind of view I have. Possibly would be able to say that in the future, not now.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Are there another question? If anyone have any questions, you can open your mic and ask your question. Song Folk, you have a question?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Yeah. I think that you have done very well with answering a lot of questions there, dear Professor Sabur. So thank you very much. Ended so all that remains for me to say is thank you everyone that joined us, and I thank you very much for taking the time out to present to us today, dear Professor Sabur. It's been really appreciated.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mohammed, to organize this, and it was a great pleasure to be here, and thanks for having me, and I really appreciate that, and I'm looking forward to maybe talking to you in the future. Thanks to Khaled especially to take the lead on the organization. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. I hope
Thanks a lot. Bye. Assalamu alaikum.
Salam wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.